A bell tolls across the fog-drowned harbor. One, then two, then silence. Each note rolls through the mist like the breath of something ancient, older than prayer, older than the memory of man. The sound settles upon the water, soft but heavy, as if mourning what has not yet died. Beneath the gray swell, the ships breathe like sleeping beasts, their wooden ribs groaning beneath the weight of salt, hope, and prophecy. Lanterns sway along the docks, their light trembling upon the slick cobblestones. Figures move like shadows, men with hollow eyes and calloused hands, whispering odes to saints who have long forgotten their names. Ropes creak, sails unfurl like pale wings, and somewhere among the whispers, a prayer is spoken not for fortune, but for forgiveness. The captain stands apart, his silhouette etched against the mist. His beard is silvered with frost, and his eyes carry the stillness of storms endured. Around his neck hangs a small crucifix, the metal worn smooth by years of fear. He touches it once, not in faith but in habit. His gaze lifts toward the shore, where a single candle flickers in a window. The light trembles, as if uncertain whether to burn or surrender to the dark. His wife stands behind that light, though he cannot see her. She has known this silence before, the kind that comes before the sea claims its due. He does not wave. There are no words to carry across the fog, only the sound of the anchor groaning upward, the sea answering in its low, endless sigh. They sail not for glory, nor even for gold. They sail for reasons no man speaks aloud, for penance, for pride, for the ache of something unnamed. The voyage ahead is whispered to be cursed. Yet still, the ropes tighten, the oars dip, and the harbor begins to fade. The shoreline dissolves behind them, stone, smoke, and memory slipping into the mist. Only the tolling bell remains, echoing through the gray distance like a warning swallowed by time. Night falls without ceremony. The sky folds itself over the sea, black and endless. The wind dies, leaving only the groan of timbers and the slow rhythm of waves against hull. The men speak little now. They sit by the faint glow of lanterns, carving wood, mending nets, staring at nothing. One of them's a tune too old to have words. Then the compass begins to spin. It turns once, twice, then whirls without direction, its needle trembling like a dying bird. The captain leans over it, his brow furrowed. He shakes it, whispers a curse, then sets it down. But the needle does not still. It dances, wild and aimless, as though the world itself has lost its north. Above, the stars hide behind a curtain of cloud. Not one dares to show its face. A whisper moves among the men, quiet, fearful. The sea's watching, one mutters. Another spits into the water, crossing himself. The youngest sailor, barely grown, asks what it means when the sky goes blind. The boatswain answers without looking up. It means she remembers. The boy does not ask who she is. He does not need to. The night deepens. The fog thickens until even the lantern light feels like a dream too faint to believe. The ship drifts as though untethered from the earth itself. The sea grows still, unnaturally still, as if holding its breath. And then they hear it, a sound, low and deep, rising from beneath the hull. It is not wind. It is not wave. It is something alive, a hum, vast and unbroken, vibrating through the wood, the ropes, the bones of every man aboard. The air trembles with it. One sailor drops to his knees, clutching his ears, muttering a prayer. Another laughs, too loud, too sharp, the kind of laughter born from terror. The captain closes his eyes. He feels it in his chest, that hum, that ancient pulse, and somewhere deep within it, he hears voices. Not clear words, but echoes, fragments, the ghost of languages drowned centuries ago. He opens his eyes to the dark. Hold course, he says, though the compass still spins and the sails hang limp. Hold course. The men obey, for obedience is all that remains when faith has fled. Hours pass. The fog begins to thin, revealing a horizon that gleams faintly with the cold light of dawn. The sea, once black, turns to mercury. In a pale shimmer, the men see shapes beneath the surface. Not fish, not wrecks, but something vast and shifting, moving just beyond sight. Wrecks, one man whispers. Old ships, but another shakes his head. They're moving against the current. The captain stares into the silver depths, his face unreadable. In the reflection of the rising light, his eyes seem older, as if he, too, has become part of some story the ocean tells itself again and again. A gull screams overhead, circling once before vanishing into the mist. Its cry echoes like a warning that arrives too late. The hum fades as the sun rises, leaving behind only silence. The men breathe again, though none speak of what they heard. To name such things is to invite them back. They work in silence, adjusting the rigging, bailing the bilge, pretending the world still obeys its rules. But beneath the surface, something has changed. The captain stands at the bow, eyes fixed on the line where sea meets sky. The horizon wavers like heat on stone. He cannot tell if it's land or mirage. A faint wind stirs, bringing with it the smell of iron and rot, like old blood turned to salt. He thinks of the candle in the window, of how small it looked, trembling in the dark. He wonders if she has already blown out. Behind him, the crew begins to murmur again. They speak of omens, of drowned saints and wandering stars, of ships that sail for years and never find a shore. One man swears he saw hands reaching from the waves. Another claims he felt the ship being pulled, not by current, but by will. The captain says nothing. He knows the sea hungers for stories. It feeds on belief. And once a man begins to believe the water is alive, it will answer him. By evening, the sky bleeds red. Clouds like torn banners drag across the horizon. The wind returns, but it carries no comfort, only the cold bite of distance. The sails billow, the ship groans forward, and the men move faster, as though motion itself can keep the darkness from catching them. When night comes again, it is deeper than before. The stars remain hidden. The compass lies useless. And yet, the captain feels something in his bones, a direction that cannot be charted, only endured. He touches the crucifix once more. Its metal is cold as the grave. He closes his eyes and listens to the creak of the ship, the breathing of his men, the slow, endless whisper of the sea. Somewhere in that darkness, far below, something answers. Not in sound, but in presence. The ocean remembers. Every name it has swallowed, every promise it has broken, every prayer left unfinished. It carries them all. And now it carries them too. The captain opens his eyes to the black horizon. A faint light glimmers there, distant, uncertain, like the memory of dawn. He cannot tell if it is salvation or lure. But he knows this. There is no turning back. The voyage has begun, and the sea, patient and ancient, waits to see which of them will return. The monastery stands where the continent ends, a fortress of silence upon a cliff's edge, its stones salted by centuries of wind and prayer. Below it, the sea breathes in slow, merciless rhythm, its waves gnawing at the rock as if trying to claim back what was once its own. The monks say that God's voice lives in that wind, but Brother Aldrich hears something else. A whisper not of heaven, but of hunger. Each morning, before the bell tolls for prime, Aldrich stands at the parapet, his robes snapping like torn sails. The sky is always gray here, a thin veil between this world and the next. He looks out where the horizon bends, where the sea becomes a bruise of blue and iron. Somewhere beyond that line, he believes the world folds in on itself, and on the other side lies a reflection of all that men have failed to understand. Inside, The scriptorium hums with the quiet patience of hands and breath. Feathers scrape vellum. Lamps sputter. Ink pools like black glass in shallow bowls. The brothers copy the old maps. Seas littered with impossible beasts. Lands outlined by imagination more than memory. Dragons curl around coastlines, their scales rendered in careful detail by men who have never seen the ocean. Every inch of ink is a prayer, an act of order against chaos. Aldrich, however, doubts the order. His quill hesitates when tracing the edge of the known world, that sudden end where the mapmakers wrote Finis Terrae, the end of the earth. His hand trembles. He cannot help but think the world does not end there. That beyond those false edges lies something vast and waiting. One evening, as storm clouds gather over the sea, he lingers long after Compline. The others have gone to their cells, their chants fading into stone. He remains, alone among the maps, tracing a coastline with his fingertip. The ink feels warm, alive somehow. A voice stirs within the thunder outside, deep, rhythmic, almost human. Then comes the crash, a sound like mountains breaking. Bells are rung, torches raised. From the cliffs, the brothers see it, a ship dashed against the black rocks, its hull shattered by the storm's teeth. Aldrich watches as figures scatter into the surf like insects. The monks rush to the shore with lanterns and ropes, their chants of mercy swallowed by the wind. Only one survives. Dragged from the water, the man coughs up salt and blood, clutching a chest to his chest as though it were a relic. He whispers something in a tongue no one recognizes. When Aldrich bends close, he hears just one word repeated between gasps. Reflector, a sound like Latin, yet not. Then the man dies, eyes open to the night sky, as if seeing stars that no one else can. The chest is locked. It smells of oil and the deep of something not meant for dry air. The abbot orders it sealed away until morning. But Aldrich cannot sleep. He returns to the chapel after midnight. The storm has eased, leaving the world drowned in the smell of rain and salt. The chest sits near the altar, water dripping from its iron corners. His hand trembles as he opens it. Inside, charts, maps drawn with a precision no monk could imagine. Coastlines shifting like breath, lines that move when caught by candlelight. The ink gleams with colors not known to the earth. Blue that bends into green, gold that dissolves into shadow. When he lifts one sheet, it feels alive beneath his fingers like thin skin over pulse. He lays it flat on the floor. Candlelight ripples across it, and for an instant, the sea outside seems to echo, wave for wave, as if the map itself were a mirror. His reflection flickers there, then vanishes. The air hums, and in that hum, he hears it again, the call. A slow heartbeat, deep and rhythmic, like the pulse of the ocean. It aligns with his own. Aldrich falls to his knees. "Show me," he whispers. "If there is truth beyond ink and faith, show me." The flame gutters. The map darkens. And somewhere far below, the waves strike the cliff like the tolling of a bell. By dawn, he has made his decision. The abbot finds his cell empty, save for a note, a confession written in a shaking hand. "Forgive me. The sea has called me to confession deeper than words." The bells ring for matins, their echoes rolling across the water like warnings. In the courtyard, the brothers gather, robes whipping in the wind, faces pale as parchment. Far below, at the edge of the shore, Aldrich walks alone. His sandals sink into wet sand. He carries the maps in a leather case against his chest. A small vessel waits for him, the last of the fishermen's boats, its hull patched and frail. The old sailor who owns it watches him approach with wary eyes. "That sea takes more than it gives," he mutters. Aldrich nods. "Then perhaps it holds what it has taken." The man crosses himself. "And if it doesn't, then I will know the truth of silence." He pushes the boat from the shore. The oars creak. The sea opens before him like a black road. Behind, the monastery bells toll one last time, each strike echoing across the waves like the heartbeat of a dying world. For hours, he rows through fog so thick it swallows sound. Only the rhythm of his breath and the soft slap of water remain. Then silence, a vast, unnatural stillness. Even the sea seems to hold its breath. He opens the case. The map glows faintly in a mist. The lines shift again, aligning to his course as if guiding him somewhere unseen. He feels his body lighten, as though drawn forward by invisible threads. Then a shimmer. Through the fog, the horizon bends in upon itself. The sea curves upward, reflecting the sky like a sheet of glass. For one impossible instant, the world becomes two, mirrored halves joined at the horizon. Aldrich stares into it, heart hammering, and sees another ship approaching. His ship, himself at the helm, a reflection too perfect to be illusion. He reaches out a trembling hand toward his mirrored self, and the sea rises to meet him. A sound like 1,000 voices fills the air, whispers, prayers, screams, and laughter, all woven together. The surface splits. Water folds over him, pulling him into the mirror. The boat drifts empty. Days later, fishermen find it near the shore. Inside, the leather case lies open. The maps are gone. Only one scrap of vellum remains, inked with a single phrase, Mare Veritas, the Sea of Truth. The monks bury the relic and pray for Brother Aldrich's soul. Yet some nights, when the wind turns and the tide surges against the cliffs, the brothers swear they hear footsteps pacing the scriptorium, pages turning, quill scratching lines no hand can trace. And sometimes, on clear nights, the sea itself seems to shimmer, as if beneath its surface, another monastery stands reflected in perfect stillness. Bells ringing from a world that mirrors our own. A world where Aldrich still copies maps that bleed with errors and dreams of what lies beyond them. The tide moves out. The world exhales. The cliff stands waiting. And somewhere, in a hush between wind and wave, the next journey begins. Lanterns sway like captive stars along the deck of the St. Mirabelle, their light trembling against the breath of the northern wind. The sea is a black mirror, and each reflection burns and breaks with every swell. Beneath that wavering gold, faces emerge, tired, scarred, some muttering prayers, others gnawing on silence. The ship creaks as if remembering older voyages, older sins. At the prow stands Lady Isabel of Rouen, her veil snapping in the wind like a banner of mourning. The salt lashes her cheeks, but her eyes do not flinch. Behind her, the crew murmurs in dialects born of every forgotten shore. Thieves, deserters, widowers, the condemned and the forsaken. None of them sail for glory. They sail because the land has cast them out. The St. Mirabelle groans against the tide, her hull slick with tar and superstition. The men whisper that the sea remembers names, that every soul thrown to its hunger is carried still, just beneath the surface, whispering in the foam. They say the northern waters have no bottom, only mirrors. Yet Isabel listens not to fear, but to the rhythm of the waves, the same rhythm that filled her husband's lungs before he drowned in a fountain of courtly rumor. They called it an accident, a slip step on whetstone, but she remembers the stains on his letters, wax that should have been red but wasn't. She remembers the eyes of the bishop when he offered condolences too swiftly, and she remembers the silence that followed when her husband's ships, her inheritance, were sold without her consent. So when the king's court turned its back and called her cursed, she sold her jewels for a single vessel, this one, and gathered those with nothing left to lose. A crew of ghosts sailing toward a legend. The island they seek is not on any chart. Some call it Isola Sanguinis, the Isle of Blood, a place that appears only beneath the veil of northern fogs. A wandering land half myth, half memory. It is said that those who reach it either find absolution or are never seen again. As night thickens, a strange current takes hold, gentle at first, then insistent, pulling them northward, as if an unseen hand were guiding the keel. The compass spins like a mad thing. The helmsman curses softly, his breath fogging the brass. "The stars have turned," he says. But Isabel only whispers, "No, we have." The wind carries the scent of iron. Beneath the waves, faint lights pulse like the beating of a colossal heart. The crew gathers at the rail, drawn by the glow that seeps upward from the deep, red, then gold, then a color that has no name. A sailor crosses himself, muttering of lost souls. Another spits into the sea and turns away. But Isabel does not move. The reflection in the water looks back at her. Not her face, but her husband's, blurred by ripples. She should turn back, but she doesn't. The ocean demands a price, and she intends to pay it. By the second night, the air grows heavy, thick with a mist that clings to the lungs like oil. The lanterns dim one by one, their flames hissing as though smothered by unseen hands. The ship slows without command, sails sagging, ropes dripping with dew that gleams like tears. The crew grows restless. They whisper of omens, a gull that flew backward, a shadow that passed beneath the hull without sound. Then comes the voice, faint, not human, a woman's song, threaded through the fog, soft, sorrowful, endless, the kind of sound that feels remembered rather than heard. The men freeze. One drops to his knees. Another presses a blade against his own throat just to feel something real. Isabel walks among them like a ghost herself, her boots whispering against the damp deck. She listens. It is not a siren's call. It is a lament. And in that lament, she hears her name. She grips the rail, her breath catching. The fog thickens until the world is nothing but the ship and the sound. The St. Mirabelle suspended in a womb of mist. Then, through the pale curtain, shapes emerge. Towers, arches, the jagged silhouette of something vast and motionless. An island? Yes, but no island made by God's hand. The cliffs gleam wetly, carved not of stone, but of coral and bone. The sea breaks against it without a sound, as if even the waves fear to speak here. Along the shore stand figures, tall and still, cloaked in salt. Statues, perhaps, or those who came before and never left. Isabel orders the anchor dropped. The chain rattles into the deep and does not strike bottom. The men refuse to disembark. They claim the island breathes. She looks toward it, and for a heartbeat, she thinks they are right. When dawn breaks, it comes wrong. A split horizon, one sun rising while another sinks. The sea between them turns the color of spilled blood. Isabel steps into a small boat alone, her hands steady on the oar. The crew watches in silence, too afraid to call her back, too guilty to let her go. The fog parts only for her, as if the island itself had been waiting. The shore crunches beneath her boots. The sand is pale and dry, though no tide has ever reached this place. The air hums faintly, as though charged with memory. She moves inland, passing relics that glisten under the morning light. A broken compass, a child's wooden cross, a crown swallowed by rust. Every object feels deliberate, placed by a hand that knows her story too well. And then she finds it, a fountain in the heart of the island, carved from obsidian and flowing with water red as garnet. The same shape, the same cruel beauty as the one in which her husband drowned. Beneath its surface, something stirs. Her reflection changes. The face she sees is not her own. It is his, alive, lips moving beneath the water. "Why did you come?" The voice trembles through her bones. "To find the truth," she whispers. The surface ripples. Truth has no home here, only memory. For a moment, she feels the weight of every decision. The exile, the whispers, the sleepless nights carved hollow by grief. She reaches out, fingers grazing the crimson water. It burns cold as ice. The world tilts. The air folds inward. The island groans. Back on the St. Mirabel, the crew watches as the mist begins to recede. They call her name, but there is no answer. Only silence, deep, vast, eternal. Then, on the horizon, something moves. The island fades like a mirage, swallowed by the sea. The current shifts, the ship rocking free, her ropes humming with sudden wind. The helmsman turns, and there she stands at the prow, veil gone, eyes hollow yet shining. The men fall silent. No one asks what she saw. No one dares. She turns her gaze northward once more, to where the fog still clings like a living thing. The sea beneath glows faintly, pulsing like a buried heart. For a moment, it almost seems to beckon. And as the St. Mirabel sails onward, lanterns flickering against the dying light, Isabel whispers, not a prayer, not a curse, but a vow. If the ocean remembers every name, then it shall remember mine. The horizon swallows the ship whole. The wind carries only her echo, and the sea, patient as eternity, waits. The port of Amalfi hums like a living thing. 1,000 tongues, 1,000 hungers, all beating against the sea. Nets slap the docks, heavy with writhing silver. Merchants shout prices into the wind, their voices half drowned by the gulls that spiral like scraps of parchment torn by God's own hand. The scent of fish and oil hangs thick, mingled with the perfume of incense drifting from a chapel whose doors are never closed. And beneath it all, beneath the noise and the fever, a boy sits by the tide pools, tracing shapes in the foam. Matteo, barefoot, silent, eyes caught between the shifting light of water and sky. To others, he is only a dock boy, the son of a man who left and never returned. But in his hands, the tide is a language, one his father began teaching him long before he vanished into the Western Sea. His father had been a mapmaker, a dreamer disguised as a tradesman. He drew coastlines with trembling reverence, as if they were prayers. He once told Matteo, "Every map is a confession of what we fear to touch and what we long to find." When the ship carrying him westward never returned, Amalfi forgot his name. But Matteo did not. Years passed, and silence grew over that memory like lichen over stone, until one morning, while sorting through the remnants of his father's chest, he found the map, half finished. The ink burned out at the edges, fading into a color no pigment could hold. Flame-colored, as if the sea itself had licked it. He traced the line where the world ended. The parchment was dry, but warm, unnaturally so, as though it remembered a human pulse. That night, Matteo dreamed of his father standing at the world's edge, holding a lantern. The light flickered red, and the sea behind him shone like molten glass. When he woke, the map lay open on his chest, its crimson veins faintly glowing in the dark. He took that as an answer, or a summons, and so he left. The fleet to Flanders was gathering, merchant ships heavy with cloth, salt, and rumor. Matteo begged for passage, offering his hands, his youth, his hunger. They gave him a coil of rope and a place among the lowest men. He stitched his father's map into the lining of his coat, close to his heart, where it whispered against his ribs like a secret. The first weeks were merciful. The sea was patient, almost kind. Days passed in rhythm, hoisting sails, scrubbing decks, eating hard bread that tasted of brine. At night, Matteo would lie beneath the masts and watch the stars ripple on the waves, wondering if his father had once followed the same constellations. But soon the world began to change. The wind grew restless, pulling at the rigging with unseen hands. The sun dimmed behind a veil of green haze. Even the sea birds vanished. One by one, the older sailors began to whisper of omens, of routes that turned against their makers. They spoke of maps that did not guide but summoned. It began with a map. In the damp belly of the ship, Matteo unstitched his coat and drew it out, hoping for comfort, but found light. Faint at first, pulsing through the fibers of the parchment like the heartbeat of some buried creature. Then brighter, enough to make the ink shimmer and shift, as though the coastlines were moving beneath his gaze. He pressed his palm to the page, and for a moment he felt something answer. That night, the sea began to moan. The timbers groaned underfoot, the hull shuddered as though struck by a pulse from below. Lanterns swung violently from their hooks, scattering sparks that hissed into the salt dark air. The captain shouted orders, but the wind tore his voice apart. Matteo climbed to the deck, his fingers raw with fear. Lightning split the sky into burning veins, each flash revealing faces, wide-eyed, soaked, muttering prayers that vanished before they reached heaven. And beyond the rail, the sea, no longer black but red, not with blood, but with light, the same crimson glow that leaked from his father's map. It pulsed across the waves, spreading outward, swallowing horizon and sky alike. Then came the whisper, not of the wind, but of water. You have come too far to turn back. The words did not sound. They arrived, heavy and certain, pressing into the marrow of his bones. Matteo stumbled to the edge. The map in his hands burned like a coal, its ink alive, symbols flaring in language older than stars. The sailors screamed behind him. Some fell to their knees. Others leapt into the red storm, seeking mercy from the deep. The compass spun, the world unmoored. Then, in one blinding instant, the ship's heart broke. The mainmast cracked like a bone under divine weight. Lightning struck the sea so close it seemed to tear the world open, revealing beneath the waves a shape vast and glimmering, like a continent made of flame. The air bent, time itself quivered. Matteo clung to the railing as the ocean surged upward, swallowing the deck in a single, monstrous breath. He saw his father then, or something wearing his face, standing upon that impossible light, holding a lantern that burned not with fire, but with memory. His mouth moved, but no words reached the boy. Only the gesture, a hand raised, palm open, as if to say, see, and Matteo did. The sea was not water. It was glass, turning itself inside out. Beneath it, he saw worlds, coastlines that defied geometry, mountains shaped like crowns, rivers that looped into themselves. The map had not been a chart of land, but of thresholds, of places where reality thins like wet parchment, where longing itself can tear a hole in the world. His father had not drowned. He had crossed. The ship's hull groaned one last time, then gave way. The sound was almost tender, like a door closing. Matteo's body was lifted, weightless, into the red mist. The light folded around him, warm as breath. He saw his father's face one final time, and in that gaze, not recognition, but surrender. Then everything broke apart, sea, sky, self. When the storm passed, the world was silent. At dawn, wreckage drifted toward the coast of Brittany. Shattered timbers, torn sails, a single crate of salt still unbroken. The sailors were gone. Of Matteo, there was no sign. Only a piece of parchment, washed ashore, its ink half-burned, the rest shimmering faintly in the morning light. Fishermen who found it claimed the symbols changed each time they looked, as though the map were still dreaming. The oldest among them swore they could hear it hum when the tide came in. Years later, on certain nights, the sea west of Amalfi glows faintly crimson. Mariners say it's the reflection of volcanic dust, or some trick of the moon. But the old women, lighting candles for the lost, whisper otherwise. They say it's the lantern of a boy who followed his father beyond the edge of reason. A boy who found the world his father saw, and never came back. And when the wind is right, carrying salt and ash and something else that burns, one might almost hear a voice, low and distant, carried on the tide. Every map is a confession. The sea answers in silence. The northern wind howls like a wounded beast. It moves across the frozen sea, clawing at the sails of ships trapped in the skin of ice. Lanterns sway from the masts like faint souls, their light barely touching the pale vastness that stretches in every direction. The men aboard speak little now. Words freeze in the air before they can reach another's ear. The world has narrowed to breath, frost, and the low groan of wood under pressure. Bjorn the Grey stands at the prow, wrapped in a cloak rimed with salt. His beard hangs stiff with ice, his eyes searching the sky where green light shivers like torn silk. In his palm lies the relic, a small carving of bone, smooth as river stone, its surface etched with runes older than any prayer he remembers. It had been given to him by a dying priest, who said it pointed always towards salvation. But salvation is a direction that grows dim in the far north. The aurora bends and splits, casting colors across the ice, green, violet, the faint red of a wound healing badly. Beneath it, the sea heaves like something alive, restless beneath its frozen skin. The ships creak, oars lie still, and the men murmur of omens. They speak of gods watching from beyond the sky's veil, their silence heavier than the snow that keeps falling without end. Night and day have long since lost their meaning. The sun rolls weakly along the horizon, never rising, never gone. The men measure time by the frost that thickens on their ropes, by the dwindling of their food, by the sound of one more man coughing through the night. When they sleep, they dream of green fields that dissolve into white. Bjorn moves among them, touching shoulders, speaking small words meant to warm them. He tells them of the edge of the world, the place they were meant to find, a place where the gods once fell, where the sea poured into the void, and beyond which only the wind returned. Yet even as he speaks, the certainty in his voice falters. The relic's runes, once glowing faintly with warmth, are fading into nothing. One night, as the aurora flares brighter than ever, a sound rises, a deep cracking beneath the hull. The ice shifts, screams like metal being torn. Men leap to the rails, eyes wide, and watch as the sea below begins to move again. The ice is breaking. A black current opens, wide and cold as the mouth of a god. Bjorn orders the oarsmen to push. The ships slide forward, slow and trembling, into the open dark. Around them, the floes grind and close, splintering with the sound of bones snapping. A man slips and vanishes into the black. His scream cuts short. The others stare, their faces hollowed by hunger and fear. No one speaks his name. They row through a night that has no horizon. The aurora dances above them, painting their faces in ghostly green. One by one, the men begin to whisper. Some pray to Odin, others to Christ. Some whisper to the sea itself. It answers with silence, vast, unbroken, endless. Bjorn feels the relic growing colder in his hand. He lifts it to the light, but where once he saw the runes, now there's only the reflection of his own eyes. Eyes that no longer remember the shape of home. In their dreams, the men see their villages, but the faces have changed. Wives were strangers' voices. Children stand in doorways without names. Fires burn where churches once stood. Home, it seems, has forgotten them. When morning comes, if it is morning, the sea is a mirror. Their tracks have vanished. No wake follows behind them. It is as if the world has closed its memory. The men begin to turn on one another, softly at first. A muttered blame over lost rations, a shove at the herb bench. Then louder. A fight breaks out, knives drawn, breath steaming in the frozen air. Bjorn steps between them, voice low, eyes fierce. "We are not lost," he says. "The gods are only silent. But silence is not faith. It is the slow erosion of it." That night, a storm rises from nowhere. The sky splits open, flinging snow like shards of glass. The ships tilt, ropes snapping, sails tearing loose into the void. Bjorn clings to the mast, shouting over the roar. Lightning flashes, not white but green, illuminating faces twisted with terror. And in that brief light, he sees the relic glowing again, faintly, then fiercely, until it burns like a coal in his hand. He holds it high. For a moment, every man turns toward it, eyes reflecting its light. Then, as suddenly as it came, the glow fades. The relic turns black. The storm passes. What remains is silence, thick and absolute. The sea lies flat again, smooth as polished stone. No birds, no wind, no sound of life. The men sit in their places, exhausted, hollow-eyed. They no longer ask where they are. Bjorn stares at the relic, its surface now blank, the carvings erased. He understands, then, what the priest meant when he called it a compass of faith. It points not toward a place, but toward belief itself. And belief, once lost, has no direction. The days blend into one another. Some men stop eating, their minds wandering far inland. One walks off the ship and onto the ice, barefoot, whispering his wife's name. They watch him fade into the white until even his shadow disappears. Bjorn dreams of circles, the endless turning of sea and sky, of death and return. He sees the faces of his men, then sees his own among them. He wakes with frost in his beard and the taste of salt on his lips, unsure if he is still dreaming. One evening, the aurora returns, brighter than before. It ripples across the sky, and for the first time, Bjorn feels warmth. He looks down and sees his reflection in the sea, not as he is, but as he was, young, strong, unscarred by the years. Behind that image, something vast moves, not God, not man, but memory itself. He whispers a prayer without words. The wind answers with a sigh that might be mercy. When dawn finally comes, or what passes for dawn in this world of half-light, the ships drift among shattered ice. The men lie still, faces turned upward as if listening for a sound that never came. Bjorn stands alone at the prow once more. In his hand, the relic catches the pale light. He turns it over and sees, faintly, his reflection again, two hollow eyes staring back. For a long time, he studies them. Then he lets the relic fall into the sea. It sinks without a ripple. Bjorn looks to the horizon. There is no edge, no boundary, only the same pale, gray stretching forever. The sea has become the sky, the sea. The world is a circle without beginning or end. He breathes in the cold and closes his eyes. The ship drifts onward, carried by a current that moves without sound or destination. Somewhere ahead, the light bends once more as if opening a door. And through that door, perhaps, the next story begins. The tide is low, and the wind walks softly across the stones. Somewhere beyond the dunes, the sea hums its endless psalm, a hymn for the lost and the waiting. A single lantern sways in the darkness, its flame trembling against the cold breath of the Atlantic. Beneath it walks a woman wrapped in black wool, her footsteps filling with salt water as the tide creeps closer. The people of the coast call her the widow of tides. They say she speaks to the drowned. Each night, she comes to the shore when the moon hides, whispering the names of ships she has blessed and buried. Her lantern burns not for the living, but for those who left and never returned. For years, she has sent vessels into the mist, not with passengers, but with prayers. Prayers folded in waxed cloth and sealed with her tears. Each voyage she blesses ends the same. Broken masts, splintered keels, and the silence of gulls circling an empty horizon. Still she comes. Still she prays. The fishermen watch her from afar, crossing themselves as she passes. No one dares to speak her real name anymore. To some, she is a saint. To others, a curse stitched in human form. And yet, her eyes carry no malice, only the soft exhaustion of someone who has waited too long for a door that never opens. But this night is different. From the dark edge of the village, hooves strike the stones. A horse approaches, its rider cloaked in frost. The sound breaks the rhythm of the waves. She turns, lifting her lantern, and the flame paints his face in fractured gold. A young knight, worn thin by distance and sleeplessness. His armor bears the sigil of Anju, dulled by sea salt and blood. In his hand, a sealed packet glints beneath the wax. Red, with a crest she has not seen since her wedding day. Her heart stops. It is her husband's mark. The knight dismounts, breath clouding in the cold. "My lady," he says, his voice a rasp of reverence and fear. "I bring word from the western waters." He kneels, pressing the letter into her palm. The wax is cold, but the impression, the half-lion, half-cross, is unmistakable. Her husband's seal. Her husband, who vanished 7 years ago, leaving her nothing but an unfinished prayer and the taste of salt on the wind. She breaks the seal with shaking fingers. The parchment smells of iron and rain. The words, written in a hand she knows too well, seem to breathe. "The sea has shown me its hidden country. I live where the stars sink beneath the waves. If you still seek me, follow the lantern that burns where the world ends." The knight watches her, his eyes hollow with something unspoken. "I saw him," he says, "alive, beyond the western fog, where no map holds the truth. He led a ship through waters that shimmered like glass, and then vanished again. He hesitates. He bade me find you, to guide us there." The widow stares out toward the black horizon. The tide swallows the footprints she left behind. For the first time in years, her silence is not prayer. It is the weight of choice. That night, the village sees her lantern burn brighter than ever before. By morning, she has gone to the harbor. The knight waits beside a ship small enough for the shallows, but strong enough for faith. The crew are men who owe debts to God and chance alike. Thieves, deserters, wanderers without graves. They do not meet her eyes. Only the knight dares to look, and even he seems unsure whether he has sought salvation or doom. They set sail as dawn bleeds into fog. The shore vanishes within minutes, devoured by the white. The sea becomes a breathing thing, shifting and whispering like cloth drawn over a coffin. The widow stands at the bow, her lantern swinging beside her like a pulse. Days blur. The compass stutters. The sun loses its direction. The men grow restless. They whisper that she has led them into a curse. Some pray aloud. Others mutter of seeing faces in the water, pale, familiar, watching from below. But the widow hears something else. At first, it is only the hum of the tide, the rhythmic sigh that fills the void between waves. Then beneath it, a voice. Faint, almost laughter. Her husband's laughter. The sound that once filled their small stone house on storm nights, when he would trace the coastline on maps and tell her the sea had bones, just like men. She closes her eyes. The voice returns, clearer now, calling her name. The knight does not hear it. His face grows thinner each day, eyes fever bright, his mind unraveling like a sail in wind. He mutters to himself, clutching a small relic. A charm of the Virgin he believes will keep the storm at bay. When she tells him of the voice, he only shakes his head. The sea tricks those who listen too closely, he warns. It wears familiar voices like masks. But she knows the sound of her husband's breath between syllables. She knows it too well. Nights pass in silence until the world itself seems to stop. No wind, no stars, only fog, thick as wool, heavy as ash. The crew fall in an uneasy sleep, one by one. Only she remains awake. Her lanterns flame the last heartbeat of the ship. Then she sees it. Far below the waves, through the still water, a faint glow. A lantern, not drifting, not fading, but steady, patient, waiting. Its light trembles like memory. She leans over the railing. The water seems shallow, though they sail above a depth no sound has ever measured. The voice returns, gentle now, coaxing, "Come home." The knight stirs behind her, delirious. "My lady, what do you see?" But she is already stepping forward, the hem of her cloak drinking the sea. Her lantern flickers as she descends, her reflection dissolving into the glow below. The water rises to her knees, her waist, her throat. One final breath, and she smiles, a small, unearthly thing, the kind one gives when a promise has finally kept its word. The sea closes over her like a vow. For a moment, the fog shivers. The ship tilts. The knight runs to the rail, shouting her name into the dark. But the water offers no sound, no echo, only a faint ripple, circling outward until it fades into stillness. At dawn, the fog parts. The sea lies calm and glassy. The knight stands alone, hollow-eyed, clutching the empty lantern that floats beside the hull. Inside, the flame is gone, but the glass glows faintly, as if something deep beneath still breathes against it. He stares westward, toward the horizon where light and water blur into one endless color. Then, wordless, he takes up the oar and turns the ship toward that glow, toward the place where the stars are said to sink beneath the waves. The people of Brittany still tell her story. They say the widow of tides did not drown. She crossed over to a country where the dead wait with open hands. And when storms rise sudden from clear skies, when ships vanish without a trace, the sailors whisper that she walks the seabed still, lantern in hand, guiding those who dare to follow love beyond the edge of the known world. The waves answer only with silence. The rain had not stopped for 7 days. It fell in veils so heavy the streets of Amalfi turned to rivers, swallowing torches, drowning footsteps, and washing away the ink of the living. Roof tiles clattered from sodden houses, and the salt wind pressed the scent of the sea deep into the bones of the town. Beneath the bells' drowned tolling, a man waded through the flooded market, not to flee, but to search. Elias, the cartographer, a maker of worlds that fit upon parchment, a man who drew oceans as blue veins and mountains as scars. He had once believed that every place could be known, that all mysteries could be tamed by ink. But that faith had rotted, like the paper in his shop. When the flood came, he stood before his shelves, maps floating like ghosts, directions bleeding into one another, and felt a strange calm. The world, it seemed, was erasing itself. Then he saw it. Among the debris that rolled in with the storm, planks, fruit baskets, the corpse of a gull, something glimmered. A disk of brass, turning slowly in the shallows, as if drawn by a will of its own. He bent down and lifted it. A compass older than any he had ever seen. Its glass was cracked, its surface etched with markings he didn't recognize. Circles within circles, small runes that bit the light. And its needle, it did not rest. It spun in fevered loops, trembling against its cage like a trapped soul. He turned it toward the shore. The needle kept spinning. Toward the mountains, spinning still. Only when he faced the sea did it pause and quiver. That night, while the flood receded and the townspeople lit candles to thank the saints, Elias sat alone in his workshop. The compass lay before him, whispering in metal murmurs. He tried to chart its motion, every shift, every flicker, but the patterns refused logic. It was as if the device was listening, waiting for something beyond his reach. When dawn came, he found it pointing again, straight toward the open sea. He should have forgotten it, should have left it to rust, as any sensible man would. But reason had become a dull knife in him. The world on his maps, neat, contained, obedient, no longer satisfied. The flood had washed away more than streets. It had carried off his certainty. So he built a vessel. The ship was small, meant for one man only. He called it the Orison, a word for prayer. The townsfolk came to watch him work, some laughing, others crossing themselves. They said the storm had cracked his mind, that no compass could lead a man to anything but ruin. But Elias only smiled, hollow-eyed, and continued to hammer. When the day came to launch, the harbor was quiet. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. He stood by his creation, sails pale as bone, wood still smelling of pitch, and placed the compass upon the deck. Its needle quivered once, then held steady, pointing beyond the horizon. He set sail. The first days were merciful. The sky opened wide and blue. Dolphins followed the wake, leaping like silver prayers. Elias charted stars, sketched clouds, whispered old sailors' psalms to keep the loneliness at bay. But then one morning the winds died. The sea flattened into glass. No sound, no motion, not even a gull. For hours he waited, then days. Mist began to creep, slow, endless, colorless, wrapping around his ship until the world itself dissolved. He could not tell where sea ended and sky began. His breath echoed like an intruder's. He ate sparingly, drank from the rain he caught, and slept in broken dreams of falling through clouds of ink. The compass, meanwhile, had begun to change. The needle now throbbed with a faint light, its hum barely audible, like the sound of blood pulsing in one's ears. It pointed always forward, never wavering, as if leading him towards something ancient and alive. He wrote in his log, "The sea has forgotten the sun. I think it remembers only me." On the 13th night, he awoke to a sound, deep, thunderless, endless. It was not wind, nor wave. It was motion itself. He stumbled on deck, lantern swinging, and saw it. A line in the distance, darker than the dark. The mist parted just enough to reveal what no map had ever dared to hold. The horizon was falling. Water spilled over it, unending, a curtain of roaring silver plunging into an abyss below. The ocean was ending, not in land but in descent, a vast, eternal cataract, stretching from one edge of the world to the other. The compass on the deck shook violently. Its glow brightened until the brass seemed molten. Elias stood frozen. He should have turned back. He did not. The closer he drew, the stronger the pull. The air trembled with invisible force, humming like the throat of some god. The oarsmen groaned, timbers bending, sails snapping as the current seized her. He tried to anchor. The rope burned his hands, but the ship only shuddered harder. The compass rolled toward his feet. Its needle was spinning again, faster, brighter, until it became a ring of pure light. Elias stared, heart pounding, and understood this was not a guide. It was a lure. He dropped it. The compass fell, struck the water, and vanished. For a heartbeat, the sound ceased. Then came the plunge. The ship tilted, then dove. Masts shattered. Lanterns burst. Water roared around him, swallowing his cry, his breath, his maps, his name. The last thing he saw was the light beneath the waves, the same faint, circling glow, drawing him down into the quiet. Silence followed. The mist closed. The sea healed its wound. Years passed. The flood that had once drowned Amalfi became a memory told by fishermen and old widows by the docks. Yet sometimes, when the tides were strange and the moon hung low, sailors swore they saw a glimmer deep beneath their boats, a steady light, circling endlessly. Some said it was a lantern trapped beneath the water. Others, that it was Elias himself, still charting the unseen. But the oldest among them whispered that it was the heart of the world, that when a man's longing burns too fiercely, the sea does not take him. It keeps him, and somewhere far below, in the quiet beyond maps and reason, a compass turns forever, seeking a horizon that no longer exists. The fog rises like a living shroud over the harbor of Marseilles, curling in slow, deliberate spirals around the masts and coiled ropes, thickening with the scent of brine and tar. Each breath of damp air carries with it memory, the echo of voyages long past, ships swallowed by the hungry sea, and sailors whose eyes returned hollowed, reflecting nothing but the vast emptiness of the waters they had crossed. Lanterns swung gently from the quay, trembling in the fog, casting pale halos that fractured and vanished as if afraid to linger, as if the light itself were a fragile concession to the darkness. The harbor held its breath, suspended in a quiet tension. The usual clamor of shouting sailors and clanging iron softened into a distant, ghostly echo, as if the world were pausing for something unseen. A young apprentice, Eluin, knelt beside his father's vessel, fingers tracing the carved runes etched deep into the timber. The wood was damp from the evening mist, and the grooves were cool beneath his skin, carrying the faint scent of resin and salt. His touch was reverent, slow, almost ritualistic, as though awakening something sleeping in the grain. He imagined the runes whispering, murmuring tales of distant shores, of storms that shredded sails, of sailors who returned haunted by visions of the abyss. His father had vanished years ago on a voyage to the Isle of Falling Stars, a place spoken of only in hushed tones. Some claimed it was a myth, others a cursed land where ships were swallowed by the mist, leaving nothing behind but the hollow-eyed remnants of men who had glimpsed its shores. Eluin rose, brushing the damp fog from his cloak, and inhaled the brine-heavy air, tasting the chill of sea spray on his lips. The crew was already at work, moving with solemn, precise rituals born of generations of superstition and fear. Knots were tied with meticulous care, hands scarred and trembling under the strain of rope. Each sailor whispered blessings over the timbers, kissed the wood before it touched the hull, or let a drop of wine spill into the water as an offering to the spirits beneath. A seasoned sailor tasted the salt water before it touched the hull, murmuring a prayer, eyes darting to the horizon, where the fog blurred the line between water and sky. It was a dance of fear and devotion, a ritual that bound men to the sea as if the water itself could demand obedience or exact punishment. Eluin's hand gripped a small brass compass, its needle quivering with restless energy. Was it anticipation or fear? He could not tell. The metal felt alive, humming with a vitality that he could neither name nor understand. His gaze wandered past the deck, past the lanterns whose light fractured into the mist, and toward the black waters beyond the harbor. Shapes dissolved in the fog, cranes, keys, barrels, until nothing remained but the uncertain horizon, the cry of distant gulls, and the ceaseless roar of the deep. The world seemed to hang in suspension, a fragile breath between existence and oblivion, waiting for the first ripple of fate to break its stillness. The ship shuddered gently as the tide took hold, gliding past the quay, past the familiar and now vanishing shapes. Eluin's boots clung to the wet planks, the vessel alive beneath his weight, tilting and rising as though it breathed in time with the rhythm of the waves. He felt the tension of legacy pressing down on him, heavy as the fog, a reminder of the father who had vanished into the mists of legend, leaving him to navigate not only the treacherous sea, but the unseen expectations of those who remained behind. Silence fell, unnatural and complete, pressing against his ears, thick and sentient. No gull cried, no oar struck the water, only the slow, deliberate lapping of waves against the keel. The sound measured time differently, elongated, heavy, almost conversational. Eluin felt it then, the awareness that the sea knew him, had known him always. It remembered the boy tracing runes, the sun gripping a compass like a lifeline, and it might yet choose him, demand of him courage, cunning, or sacrifice. He shivered in the cold mist, heart thrumming, pulse matched to the creak of timbers and the whisper of sails. The crew moved on with purpose, their faces pale under the lantern glow, shadows shifting like ghosts across the deck. One muttered an old chant, curling into the fog. "Guide us, spirits of water, carry us where the stars fall." The wind answered faintly, tugging at the sails with a gentle insistence, almost acknowledging the plea, almost mocking it. Eloin's eyes roamed over the deck, coiled ropes like serpents in patient silence, barrels rocking slightly as if aware of the tension in the air, the scent of tar and wet was sharp and overwhelming. Each breath was laden with history, stories untold, the weight of men who had dared and failed, and the hollow echo of lost courage. He paused at the bow, tracing the outline of the ship against the fog. Lanterns flickered along the rails, casting trembling shadows that danced like spirits on the water. The timbers were worn smooth by generations of sailors, etched with the marks of their struggle, the scars of storms, the faint, lingering traces of blood and salt. His father's hand had guided these same timbers once, and now, in the half-light of a misted night, Eluin felt both the absence and the presence of that guiding force. He imagined the vanished voyage, the Isle of Falling Stars shrouded in legend, and wondered if the sea itself had been the culprit in his father's disappearance. Hours passed, though time felt suspended, marked only by the creak of the ship, the slap of waves, the whisper of fog curling against wood. Eluin studied the faces of the crew, hardened sailors, men who had survived more storms than he could name, now quiet, alert, eyes searching the horizon for omens. He felt their collective tension, a living thing that wound itself through the deck, through the rigging, and into him. Each man carried a secret fear, the fear of the unknown, of loss, of ghosts that might rise from the depths. And yet, each man carried hope, too, the fragile, persistent hope that they might reach the edge of the world and return, with their sanity intact, with tales that would become legend. A sudden gust swept the deck, sharp and wet, carrying the cry of a gull that seemed impossibly near and yet impossibly far. Lanterns flickered violently, shadows dancing across Eluin's face. He clutched the compass again, the needle trembling, pointing not towards safety, but towards something he could not yet name. The fog thickened around the masts, coiling and twisting like a serpent. Shapes emerged and vanished in its folds. A distant cliff, a rocky shoal, a phantom figure striding along the water. He wondered if it was the spirit of the sea, the memory of his father, or merely the trick of lantern light on mist. The crew whispered, voices hushed, as they tended the sails and rigging. They spoke in old codes, warnings, names of saints long forgotten. A man lit a small candle, and the flame danced and sputtered, throwing their faces into relief for a heartbeat, showing eyes wide with vigilance, hands steady despite the tremor in their knees. Another traced the runes along the mast, murmuring a prayer that had been passed from father to son, from master to apprentice, for protection, for courage, for survival. Eluin mimicked the gesture, feeling the warmth of faith in his fingertips, though doubt and fear lurked behind every heartbeat. Night deepened. The sea became a dark expanse, liquid and alive, reflecting nothing, swallowing sound. The ship crested each wave with a low groan of timber, and Eluin imagined the echoes traveling beneath the water, stirring unseen creatures, rousing the spirits of men lost at sea. He shivered in the cold mist, cloak clinging to his shoulders, salt stinging his eyes, yet he felt an exhilaration as well, a thrill born from standing at the edge of the known world, stepping into legend. The Isle of Falling Stars waited somewhere beyond, obscured by fog and story, a destination that might reward or punish, a promise and a thread entwined. He climbed to the quarterdeck, feeling the subtle sway of the ship beneath him, a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat. Lanterns glowed faintly along the rails, their light trembling across the fog. He imagined the sea as a sentient entity, watching, waiting, testing him, measuring his resolve. He felt the pull of legacy, the echo of his father's voice in the timbers, the murmurs of runes beneath his fingertips. Each moment was weighted Every breath a negotiation with forces beyond comprehension. Every glance a step further into the unknown. Hours melted into one another, punctuated by the creak of timbers and the whisper of sails. The fog began to thin slightly, revealing glimpses of horizon and stars. Yet the mystery remained. Somewhere, beyond reach, lay the Isle of Falling Stars, blurred by mist, legend, and fear. Elwyn felt the sea beneath him, the wind in his hair, the pulse of history beneath his feet. He exhaled, tasting fear and longing in the same breath, understanding that this was not merely a voyage, but a passage, a crossing from boyhood into something older, larger, and heavier than himself. The lanterns flickered one last time as the fog began to curl away from the prow, revealing nothing but dark, endless water. Somewhere beyond the rising mist, something waited, revelation, doom, or both. The crew worked silently, each man tethered to his fear and hope alike. Elwyn gripped the rail, compass in hand, heart pounding. He felt the weight of legacy, the pull of the sea, the presence of his father in memory and in timber. Tonight, he was no longer a boy tracing runes on a fog-draped quay. Tonight, he was chosen. Tonight, the voyage had truly begun.